Stanford, 2008. A small lecture room. Folding chairs, a chalkboard already half covered in symbols. A retired engineer sits in the front row with a spiral notebook. Next to him, a college kid who couldn't get into the physics major. At the board is Leonard Susskind, teaching the theoretical minimum to people who, on paper, are not supposed to be here. That shouldn't work. Physics has prerequisites, gatekeepers, a whole bureaucracy of before you're allowed to understand. But it works anyway. And it works for one reason, not genius, not pedigree, a system. By the end of this video, you'll have the system to educate yourself like Susskind, without a degree, without pretending it's easy, and without turning your curiosity into an endless playlist you never convert into skill. Watch to the end, because the last model is the part you can run every week. Most people think self-education is about motivation. They're wrong. The real divider is structure. People don't fail because they're lazy. They fail because they copy the aesthetic of learning instead of the mechanics of learning. They confuse exposure with education. They watch lectures, they save courses, they buy books, and they feel smarter. But when reality asks for output, they have nothing to show, and in 2024 the stakes are brutal. Information is cheap, persuasion is industrial, attention is contested territory. If you can't educate yourself, you become dependent. Dependent on institutions, dependent on trends, dependent on whoever sounds confident this week. So here are the two open loops. First, in a moment I'll give you a single diagnostic question that instantly tells you whether you're actually learning or just consuming. Second, I'll show you why Suskind's idea of the minimum beats the modern urge to learn everything. Then we'll build a four-part system you can use for any subject: physics, coding, economics, writing, AI. This is an educational explanation, not a substitute for formal study. Now let's talk about why the usual advice fails. The common belief is, if you're motivated, you'll learn. So you wait for motivation. You start strong. Then friction shows up. The math feels rusty. The vocabulary feels hostile. The early chapters feel slow. There's nobody grading you, nobody forcing you. So your brain chooses comfort. It goes back to the feed, back to the easy win. One more explainer, one more thread, one more summary. You get the feeling of understanding without the responsibility of it. Here's the diagnostic question. Can you solve a problem you could not solve yesterday without looking at the answer? If yes, you're learning. If no, you might be entertained. You might be informed. But you are not being educated. Because education is not what you recognize. It's what you can reconstruct. And here's the part people miss. Most self-education plans are built like libraries. They should be built like gyms. A library stores knowledge. A gym builds capability. Suskind's teaching works for ordinary people because it doesn't just say, here's the theory. It says, here is the minimum structure that lets you start doing the thing. So what is that structure? Before we build it, I want to prove something. This isn't a motivational idea. It's a historical pattern. Long before the internet, people educated themselves. Not by collecting facts, by building power. Michael Faraday is a classic example. Biographies and accounts often describe him starting with limited formal education, working as a bookbinder's apprentice, reading aggressively, taking detailed notes, and pursuing public lectures when he could. He didn't just admire a performance. He rebuilt what he heard. He organized his notes. He tried to reproduce ideas with his own hands. That's the difference. Most people are tourists in knowledge. Faraday was an immigrant. He didn't ask, do I belong here? He asked, what would it take to function here? That posture matters more than credentials. Now we get concrete. 4 principles. Each one maps directly to 2024 life. Principle 1. Start with a minimum, not a master plan. Most people sabotage themselves at the starting line with a goal that's socially impressive and psychologically impossible. I'm going to learn physics. What does that mean? Physics is not a book. It's a civilization. Suskind's core idea, right in the title The Theoretical Minimum, is permission. You don't need everything. You need the smallest set of tools that allows progress. Not the perfect path, the usable path. Because if you're self-teaching, momentum beats elegance. Here is the 2024 application. Build a minimum map in 30 minutes. 1 page, 3 layers, core ideas, 5 to 7 items, core tools, the methods you'll actually use, core outputs, what you will produce to prove you are learning. Outputs are not feelings. Outputs are artifacts. If your subject is machine learning, outputs might be implement a simple model, evaluate it, explain the result. If your subject is economics, outputs might be draw supply and demand, compute elasticity from examples, summarize and critique one argument. If your subject is writing, outputs might be 1 essay per week, revision passes with a checklist, a deliberate imitation of a great paragraph, plus a short analysis of why it works. Here's a pattern. Interrupt. If you had to prove you learned this in 14 days, what would you produce? That answer is your output layer. A minimum map does one job. It stops you from learning forever without crossing into doing. Principle 2. Replace understanding with problems. The most expensive lie in self-education is, I get it. Most of the time, I get it means I've seen it before. Familiarity is not competence. Susskind-style, especially in physics, pushes you toward exercises early, not because he enjoys suffering. Because problems are truth serum. They reveal what you can do when nobody is guiding the bicycle. This is where people quit. Not because they're incapable, because it's the first time they get honest feedback. Here is the 2024 application. Use the 3-problem rule for every concept. 1 easy problem to anchor the mechanics. 1 medium problem to force choices. 1 explanation problem where you teach it back in plain English without notes. If you can't find problems, take them from textbooks, course problem sets, or reputable sources. If you use AI, use it carefully. Ask it to generate practice problems. Do not ask it to solve them until you have attempted them. AI can be a sparring partner. It should not be your chauffeur. Mini recap. Minimum map gives direction. Problems create evidence. Now we need what makes it stick. Principle 3. Build a ladder. Intuition to formalism, to intuition. Most people think learning is linear. Chapter 1, Chapter 2, Chapter 3. Hard subjects don't work like that. They work like spiral staircases. You meet an idea early, you barely grasp it, you move on. Later, you return with new tools, and the same idea becomes clearer. Susskind teaches like that. He gives you the physical picture, then the math. Then he returns to the picture. That is not repetition, that is integration. Here is the 2024 application. For each major topic, keep 1 ladder note, 1 page, 3 sections, intuition in 2 to 5 sentences. What is this trying to say? Formalism, the minimum definitions, and 1 worked example. Back to intuition. What does the math imply? What does the tool let you predict, compute, or decide? Keep it short on purpose. If your notes are novels, you won't reread them. If you don't reread them, you won't consolidate. Pattern interrupt. Are you collecting facts or building a ladder you can climb under pressure? Principle 4. Learn in public, practice in private. There's a modern trap. Performative learning. Posting book stacks. Sharing quotes. Announcing goals. It feels like progress. Sometimes it replaces progress. Suskind's work became widely accessible because it was taught openly. Lectures, books, public explanation. That's the model. Use public resources to learn. But the real work must happen in private. Because private practice is where you can be confused without being judged. And being confused safely is not optional, it's required. Here is the 2024 application. Use the 2-room method. Public room. Watch the lecture. Read the chapter. Join discussion. Collect questions. Private room. Close inputs. Solve problems on paper. Write explanations from memory. Build small projects. Reconstruct the idea from a blank page. Even if both rooms are the same desk, you separate them with a ritual. When you enter the private room, you close the browser. Then you pick up a pen. That one move removes the escape route. I'll just look it up. Now a midpoint recap. If you want to educate yourself like Susskind, you do 4 things. You build a minimum map, you convert concepts into problems, you use ladder notes, you separate public learning from private reconstruction. Now we answer the question people avoid. What about degrees? What about credentials? Here's the clean distinction. A degree is a signal. Education is a capability. They overlap. They are not identical. Some fields require licensing and formal pathways for safety and legal reasons. Respect that. But most people who say no degree needed aren't trying to bypass safety requirements. They're trying to bypass the psychological gate, the feeling that knowledge belongs to other people. So the real question is this: can you prove capability? Because capability compounds fast in 2024. If you can show outputs, solve problems, and explain your reasoning, you can create your own proof trail. Now for the second open loop. Why minimum beats learn everything, because everything is not a plan. Everything is a procrastination strategy disguised as ambition. The minimum forces a boundary, and boundaries create completion. Completion creates confidence. Confidence creates momentum. That is how adults learn, not by perfect syllabi, by loops, which brings us to the climax, the outsider advantage. Sometimes outsiders learn faster than insiders, not because outsiders are superior, because outsiders are not trapped by institutional ritual. Institutions are good at standardizing, credentialing, and filtering. They are not always good at the shortest path to functional competence. Self-education, done right, is brutally honest. You don't get points for attendance. You don't get rescued by curves. Either you can do it or you can't. That honesty sounds harsh until you see what it gives you. Freedom, because your progress is no longer mysterious. It is measurable. Can you derive the result? Can you explain it? Can you use it? Now we tie it all together. A unified model you can run weekly. 4 steps. Simple, not easy. Step 1. Select the minimum. Choose one module, not a subject. A module has edges. A subject is endless. Examples: Newton's laws plus energy conservation, Bayes' theorem plus 10 applications. Write one persuasive essay and revise it twice. Build one small app end to end. Pick the module you can finish. Step 2. Ingest like a scientist. Watch the lecture, read the chapter for one purpose. Extract the minimum set of claims and tools. Not everything. The minimum. Write questions as you go for your practice session. Step 3. Reconstruct under constraint. This is the private room. Close inputs. Then reconstruct in one of 3 ways. Solve problems. Derive a result. Build a project. Add constraint on purpose. Time box. Limited notes. Blank page start. Constraint reveals the truth. Step 4. Compress and teach back. 1-page summary, 1 diagram, 1 2-minute explanation, not to impress strangers, so your future self can reload the module quickly, because the real enemy is not ignorance, it is forgetting. That is the weekly engine. Select, ingest, reconstruct, compress. Now I'm going to ask you an uncomfortable question. When you say, I want to learn, do you mean I want to be the kind of person who could learn? Or do you mean I am willing to enter a long, quiet season of confusion until the fog lifts? Because that second one is what learning feels like, not inspiration. Confusion, then structure, then clarity. That's why Susskind is a useful model. He doesn't just hand you conclusions, he hands you a ladder, and he expects you to climb it. This is where my fictional channel version of Leonard Susskind shows up, holding a piece of chalk and showing 0 patience for excuses. He looks at your 40 open tabs and says, close the browser. If you can't derive it, you don't know it. Then he taps the board once and disappears. Now let's make it real. A 1-week sprint you can repeat. Pick one module. Day 1, 45 minutes. Write the module title. List 5 core ideas. List 3 tools. Define one output. Choose one primary resource. 1, not 5. Day 2. 60 minutes. Ingest. Extract definitions. Write 10 questions you cannot yet answer. Day 3. 60 minutes. Reconstruct. No notes for the first 15 minutes. Then check notes only to unblock, not to coast. Day 4. 60 minutes. Reconstruct harder. Do a medium problem, then do an explanation problem. Record a 2-minute voice memo teaching the concept without notes. Day 5. 60 minutes. Output day. Build the thing. Write the mini-essay. Implement the program. Derive the core result. Day 6. 30 minutes. Compress. 1-page summary. 1 diagram. 1 paragraph, and forget everything else. Remember this. Day 7. 20 minutes. Audit. What can I do now that I could not do before? What still breaks? What is the next minimum module? That is the whole system, not a life overhaul. A loop. Now we close the first open loop again because it is the anchor. Can you solve a problem you could not solve yesterday without looking at the answer? If yes, you're learning. If no, you're browsing. No shame, just truth. Now the final reframe. Educate yourself like Susskind does not mean you become a theoretical physicist. It means you adopt the adult posture toward knowledge. You stop treating learning as entertainment. You stop treating intelligence as identity. You start treating education as a craft. A craft has tools. A craft has practice. A craft has standards. In 2024, people are overdosing on information and starving for skill. You do not fix that with more content. You fix it with more content. So the next time you feel the urge to open another tab, another explainer, another ultimate guide, ask the only question that matters. What problem am I going to solve today without looking at the answer? Solve. Derive, build, teach. Next video, we go one level deeper. How to design a personal curriculum that does not collapse after 2 weeks. Not motivation, architecture. If you want that, watch the next one. And if you want more systems like this, you can subscribe so you don't lose the thread. Pick your module, close the tabs. Do only this.